4 Muslims responded to my very first YouTube upload. I've already responded to the first half of the 71-minute video before. This is now my response to Asadullah with the comments he made around the 30-minute mark. He says the descriptive language in the Quran is a figure of speech, not meant to convey science, so don't take it that way. And you'll see something, a pattern. Apologists do not want to acknowledge the flaws because according to them, no matter how unlikely a possibility is, it has to be right instead of the Quran being wrong. They will stretch the possibilities as far as possible in order to make it work. Why do I think science in the Quran exposes Muhammad as a fraud? Because it's the exact thing that someone lying back then would have been mistaken on. 3 points I will elaborate to show you how unconvincing it is to excuse away all of this as a metaphor. Number 1, humanity was in the dark about science for a few hundred years only. Number 2, the population of the world was much smaller back then. Number 3, Muhammad brought many other radical ideas to this society. So why would he intentionally leave the Quran to be inaccurate for a small number of people for a few years, instead of for the majority of humans who will come to exist over the next 1400, nay, maybe even 10,000 years? And did he really have to portray it in a 7th century worldview? No, he didn't. He broke the norm over and over again. Muhammad told them he went to Jerusalem and then to Jannah in one night. He told them there was a resurrection and a next life. Here's Asadullah.
That Allah, says that He holds the sky up with pillars that they can't see, and
without pillars,
or excuse me, without pillars.
Without pillars. Yeah.
So essentially, okay. So this is where we get into the language and how to communicate, more so than what is actually being stated as whether it's a fact of science. And I think a lot of people, when they read the Quran, they have this interpretation in their mind, or this strange idea that somehow the message is only for people in the 21st century, or that it should only be for people in the 21st century with a particular vernacular. And we'll go into more detail when we start getting into his other claims about the sun and the moon. But my first question is, how are you supposed to speak to a 7th century Arab who doesn't have basic knowledge of contemporary scientific theories? That would be my primary question here, with regard to this issue, is how would you, if you were trying to communicate a message to a person who had very limited knowledge of, how the natural world behaved or worked behind the scenes, how would you communicate that message to them without confusing them, 1, and 2, without turning them off from that message? So that would be my first question, and I think we can run with that.
Does this mean that everything Muhammad said was in line with the current understanding of the time? No, not at all. In fact, Muslims will boast that Muhammad was a revolutionary. He broke their idols. He banned riba, usury. He said that there was a next life when the pagan Arabs didn't believe in any next life. And they say, there is none but our worldly life, and we will not be resurrected. So they didn't believe in a next life. That was revolutionary right there. Then Islam replaced tribalism and racism with a faith-based tribalism. This was radical to them too. So you're telling me Allah could do all this, but He couldn't figure out how to word His message in order to be scientifically precise for the rest of mankind for His eternal book? Or maybe the Quran was never intended for all times. Remember this. In the 7th century, especially in the backwaters of Arabia, humanity was really lost. There was no good understanding of how the world worked. There was a very rudimentary understanding of human reproduction. Nobody knew what sperm was, only semen. The idea of females having eggs was totally unknown. But it wasn't very long. Within a few hundred years, in the 9th century, Ptolemy was translated into Arabic and then into Latin in the 12th century. And then we got Copernicus and others who sped humanity forward with much more accurate models of the solar system. So to leave the confusion in the minds of humans in the Quran in order to make it easy to accept for the 7th century man, but strange to everyone else, makes no sense. Point number 2. The the world population exploded from somewhere in the 100 million range to billions. So again, I'm going to ask, why would God prefer to use a 7th century archaic model when the majority that will come, billions upon billions of people, every year would be better off if the wording was in line with reality as we know it? Our conception of the solar system is quite stable now. We're not going to suddenly say the Earth doesn't go around the sun. We have precise mathematical models that allow us to predict when every single solar eclipse will occur for the next billion years. I bet Muhammad didn't see that coming. We are seeing red flag after red flag here. If you are intellectually honest, you will admit this is problematic. If you are happy to twist things to make them fit, well, good luck to you in your life. I'd rather live with the honest reality over a comforting lie.
Intention behind the verse is what we should be focusing on. The intention of the author here is what we should be focusing on. And it's the same thing when we get to the whole thing about the sun and the moon rotating, right? What is the intention of the author? What is the message they're attempting to convey here? And if they're not attempting to convey scientific information, why are we judging the text based on that?
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm trying to say? Like, it's the same thing when, how we talk on a daily basis when we talk about the sun setting and rising and things like that. I can just imagine, okay, let me just give you an analogy. I can imagine that, Abdullah would go to like a conference or something, right? For like about how to better your life. And he's listening to this speaker on stage, and the speaker gives an analogy about, the sky and the sun and the moon and how they have phases and everything. And he speaks in colloquial language. And I can imagine Abdullah leaving this conference, going home and writing an internet review saying, he was scientifically inaccurate about how the sun and the moon rotate. It doesn't rotate because we are a heliocentric universe. Therefore, I cannot recommend his services to anyone. Okay, and then, how would normal people react to that review? They would be like, that wasn't the point of what he was trying to convey to you. Why are you focused on whether he was scientifically, or let's go up to Abdullah and ask him one day, hey, Abdullah, do you have the time? No, you cannot possess time. Time is relative. Time is relative. You cannot possess time. Okay, and it's like, I just asked you to tell me what time it is. Like, what? Abdullah.
The issue here, I think,
okay,
is,
it's like,
what's up with you? It's not up.
If he was, and I'm not saying this in an insulting way. If he was like severely autistic, I could understand that. Okay, I could understand why he's misinterpreting these things. But for him to just come back and like, it's scientifically inaccurate. It's not trying to be scientifically accurate to begin with because it's not conveying a scientific message.
Yeah.
Okay, very funny voice, Asadullah. Are you planning to take on the role as Donald Duck next? But let's look at his point. Why should we judge a text based on correctness if it isn't intending to convey scientific information? Because that's how we're able to find mistakes, damn it! Why can't we expect the creator of the heavens and earth to say things properly while still maintaining poetic beauty? As Hamza Yusuf said in this clip, atheists have a higher perspective of God than some believers.
And in some ways, their opinion of God is so high that they end up disbelieving in him. It's like their opinion is so high that I can't believe in God. I can't believe in a God that will allow pedophilia.
Let's look at an example. And he restrains the sky from falling upon the earth, unless by his permission. It is Allah who erected the heavens without pillars that you can see. Then he established himself above the throne and made subject the sun and the moon, each running its course for a specified term. Okay, so what lesson is being taught here? Allah's holding up the sky from falling on you? What does that even mean? Well, to us modern people, it sounds like nonsense. But to a 7th century man who thought the sky was a solid fixture that was being held up by pillars, Allahu Akbar. It's all magic to them. So praise Allah for keeping us safe from the sky falling. Does this achieve the intended purpose of making them feel awe? Yes, Allah is the good guy for holding up the sky. Is it accurate? No, not at all. And that's a red flag. Can you twist it to make it seem coherent? Kinda, maybe. Holding up the atmosphere? I don't know. It's out of place no matter how you spin it.
If I were to say anything, most of the doubts that I've seen, especially with regard to this whole, scientific errors thing, if I can leave anyone with this message, let me ask you a sincere question. Okay, if your message is supposed to be for all time, why would you interject information, for example, in the 7th century, that they would not even be capable of understanding? Saying when you're talking about the sun and the moon, rotating, you're doing it from the perspective of the individual. You're trying to teach a message about life, about morality, about about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala views creation and treats creation, right? So why would you go, oh, by the way, the sun and moon aren't actually moving? I mean, what relevance does that have to the message, number one? And two, if you really wanted to convince a 7th century Arab, and if they're all geocentrist, right, that would be the first way to turn off somebody listening to the message, because they'd be like, oh, that's scientifically inaccurate, because we believe in geocentrism, right?
Yeah.
So why not convey a message in such a way where everyone can understand it and not come to conclusions about its scientific accuracy? The only people that I see objecting to how the Quran presents itself to others are ex-Muslims who seem to me to believe that the Quran is not for all time, because they only want the information to be conveyed in a 21st century vernacular.
Yeah.
Which makes no sense to me, it appears to me that they don't understand what it means to be a divine text for all time. So that's what I would say. So,
Or how language works.
well, yeah, I mean, basic communication. I'm not going to, oh yeah, the Earth is currently rotating on its axis, and we're going around the sun right now. To a 7th century Arab, that would make no sense. And what relevance would that have? I mean, to explaining morality or how the afterlife is,
or why the world exists, right?
Yeah, or that has no bearing whatsoever on the message. So when they're looking for scientific errors, I just ask myself this question: or what's the point of that? If as Abdullah himself admits to, if you know that the Quran's primary message is not to convey those things.
Yep.
I mean, and as you'll continue watching, you'll see that. He says that, oh, I know the Quran is not supposed to be about this. Well, okay, then if that's the case, why are you complaining about something that's not intended to do?
Exactly, it's completely contradictory.
So, I'm done.
Funny that you're claiming it's for all time, yet it uses flawed 7th century models of the world. What in God's name? You see, what we're doing here is simple. We're trying to make sense of the world. We're trying to get a coherent conception of reality. By coherent, I mean something that jives, that clicks in, that's consistent, that doesn't contradict. You are trying to mesh the two. And as a believer, you will not entertain the possibility that the Quran is wrong.
By looking at science, we look at it has weight because of these reasons.
Okay.
We look at the Quran and it has weight because of these reasons.
Yeah.
So when we come across what looks like a contradiction, either we've misunderstood the Quran or we've misunderstood science, or actually no, those are the two.
Or, come on, Subul. What were you going to say?
To the Quran, or we've misunderstood science, or actually no, those are the two possibilities.
No, that's not the only two possibilities. There's another one. Or the Quran is wrong. That wasn't so hard, was it? That was easy. That's all you had to say. That's the third possibility. Instead, you will reinterpret the Quran, or just throw out science to make things fit. And this is what happens when you believe. You feel doubt because the two models don't fit. What does any of this have to do with morality? Nothing. So Allah should have either avoided describing the universe, period, or said it properly. The Quran would have been much more stable over time if it didn't include descriptions of the universe that have nothing to do with morality. As a Muslim, I had small cracks in my vision of reality, and as I grew more scientifically literate, these cracks got bigger and bigger, until when I couldn't deny any longer that the Quranic worldview was not just dated but wrong. Not a single thing in the Quran couldn't have come from the lips of a 7th century man. That's why I left it. And that's why I started this channel, to bring this message to the world, that Islam is false, that the Quran is wrong, that Muhammad isn't the perfect man. If you'd like to support me, check out my support page for details on how you can help. Link is below. This is your friendly neighborhood ex-Muslim, Abdullah Samir, signing out.